afternoon, good evening, everyone. We can see that people are starting to join. Welcome to the Cities on the Frontline Speaker Series session. I'm Valeria from Resilient Cities Network. Cities on the Frontline is a virtual thought leadership speaker series featuring solutions by cities for cities. It began in 2020 through a partnership between the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank Group City Resilience Program. The series provides city practitioners and the industries and the residents that they support with a platform for knowledge exchange. Today's session of the Cities on the Frontline speaker series is hosted with the support of Zurich North America and will focus on the vital role of cross-sectoral partnerships in mobilizing the necessary funding for urgent and comprehensive resilience action. Before we start, let me remind everyone of the intentions of the speaker series and the ground rules for the conversation today. The purpose of these global seminars is to have an open and honest learning conversation. We ask that you do not attribute any comments unless you have expressed permission from the person to do so. We can help obtain this permission if needed. We have about 220 registered participants for the call today. So to facilitate the discussion, we ask that you write the questions on the Q&A function of the Zoom platform. We also welcome you to introduce yourselves over the chat now. Please note that the recording of the session, as well as the summary of the discussion, will be posted online on our website. I'm happy to be co-hosting this session today with Kelly Warden from Zurich, North America, who will also take us through the panel conversation. So right now, Kelly, over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Valeria. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am excited to introduce you to this third and final webinar in our Urban Resilience series, a partnership, as Valeria mentioned, between Zurich North America, the Z Zurich Foundation, and the Resilient Cities Network. Those of you that joined us during our first two sessions know that in session one, we focused on the challenges of identifying and quantifying climate risk at the local community level. In session two, we explored the crucial role that community-driven resilience plays in addressing the complex climate challenges facing our cities and towns throughout the world. Our session today will discuss the vital role of cross-sectoral partnerships in mobilizing the necessary funding for urgent and comprehensive resilient actions. Today, we are very fortunate to have two very distinguished panelists. Lauren Sorkin is the Executive Director of the Resilient Cities Network, and Gregory Renand is the head of the Z Zurich Foundation. But before we get started, we thought it would be fun to see once again where everyone is dialing in from. I know that that Valeria suggested that you put your name and location in the chat, which is great, but I am going to ask Michelle to bring up a word cloud. If you have attended our other sessions, you know how this works, but if this is your first one, we ask if you are joining from your computer, if you can take out your phone and scan that QR code, it will take you to an app called slido.com. If you are calling from your phone, you can switch your browser over and go to www.slido.com and then enter that code in the bottom. If you scan the QR code, you don't have to enter the code. And it's a pretty simple question. We just want to learn more from you. We want to see where you're joining from. I can tell you that in my participation in these three sessions, I've been really in awe as to the global reach of this platform and how incredibly fortunate we are to have this sort of platform where we together, united in a purpose to discuss the realities of climate change and the importance of building community resilience. And really to brainstorm together the solutions that can raise awareness and the funds needed through these private partnerships that we're going to be talking about today. So I will just give you another couple of minutes to input your location. Looks like we've had about 24 of you answer the question. I know we've got more than 40 on the phone, so if you can jump over to Slido just for a minute. It's great to see Zurich represented, the Netherlands, Rotterdam, the city of Cape Town. We've got Texas, Baltimore, Florida, DC, North Carolina, Colombia, Turkey, Austin, Medellin, Japan, Schaumburg. York, Texas, Chennai, McKinney, Illinois, Chicago. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for participating in our poll. This is really great. We'll give it just one more minute, and then we'll get started. Looks like, all right, very good. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, let's get started. Lauren, I'm going to start with you. As the head of a network of 100 plus cities, what do you find cities are most struggling with when it comes to financing resilience action?
Thanks for the question, Kelly. And it's really great to be calling in from Rio de Janeiro today, where we're about to kick off the Urban 20 to really raise awareness about urban issues, and particularly the finance needed to catalyze more urban resilience programs and projects. Like the word cloud that we just saw, the Resilient Cities Network membership is incredibly diverse. And so when we think about the kind of challenges that cities are facing, they can be very different. When we look at cities that are smaller and that maybe are older cities that have already most of the infrastructure they need, versus other cities that could be much bigger, that might be in emerging market countries that are still trying to build up a lot of the necessary infrastructure to meet population's needs. So we do have a high level of diversity when you look at cities, like I saw some of our colleagues from Semarang are calling in, where you're constantly building new infrastructure to house a very vibrant young population, or cities that are very established, like in Rotterdam. And I know some of our members are called in from there. Despite those kinds of diverse city economic development statuses, we have a lot of common themes when it comes to challenges that cities see. First and foremost, no matter where you are in the world, it does seem like there's never quite adequate budget to enhance or build the infrastructure that's needed to deal with shocks and stresses. As we are living in a climate emergency, more intense storms, more intense heat, often we also see that it's hard for cities to plan for the future that's coming rather than planning their investment based on historical data. So a big challenge is having the right information to plan those investments wisely. Another issue that's quite common and that we really try to get to the heart of with resilience planning is that a lot of investment planning still happens in silos. Different departments are asked to prioritize their needs, whether that's a department of water management, transportation, education. And if those needs aren't looked at in an integrated way, can really miss out on opportunities to make the right kinds of investment. The next challenge that we see that's a very common challenge is inadequate leverage. And I think this is where it's really exciting to work with partners in finance and insurance, because many cities are still trying to accomplish their investment goals based mostly on their balance sheets. Whereas you have other cities, and in particular, we see this in our cities in North America and Europe, who have for many years leveraged the capital markets. Now, that's something we can do a lot more of. And we can do a lot more of that for resilience when we define what the risks are, when we define what there can be in terms of products that lower that risk, and make it more attractive for cities to work with the private sector to leverage that additional capital. So when I say inadequate leverage, that's really what we're talking about. It's this opportunity to develop more sophisticated portfolios and to help our cities present those in a way that brings in more finance from the private sector. And finally, and I would be remiss not saying this, in particular as an American after the last week, which was quite a dramatic one, I think, for all of us, that sometimes we also see misalignment between national government priorities and city priorities. And sometimes there isn't an ability for cities to access the kind of capital they need to really invest in resilience for their populations. And again, that makes it even more important to communicate those risks and opportunities, and to have those opportunities to work with the private sector to make sure that the investments that we can make to protect urban communities can be increasing over time and can try to meet those challenges that we see and that are increasing in the face of a changing climate.
So, Lauren, when cities do identify the gaps in their funding needs, where do you see the community, the philanthropic, and the private sector partners coming in?
It's a great opportunity that we have. It's also a great responsibility, I think, Kelly, when we look at what we can do from a network perspective and from a philanthropic perspective. We have limited resources, right, compared to the size of the need. So we have to be very focused in terms of the kinds of actions we take. I think there's really, three kinds of action and three kinds of investment that are really important from more philanthropic and civil society or networking partners. First and foremost is to be very focused in terms of building the right capacity for investments. I think we hear a lot of generalizations about the kind of capacity that's needed, but actually there's very specific capacity that's needed in project management and capital planning management around risk and resilience. And I think that building this capacity is really essential. I also talked earlier about data and predictive capabilities. We really need to invest in that in our cities, and in particular cities who don't have really the basics in terms of looking at their risk and resilience data in a holistic way and getting that information and getting that capacity built in those cities, and particular vulnerable cities. And then, and you heard me mention this a little bit in the previous answer, but I want to go into more detail. I think we have to, as a community, work with cities to help them develop portfolio approaches. I think that in many cases, it's quite attractive to look at quick wins in very specific sectors, but cities are systems. And so I think we do have to commit as a community to helping cities to look holistically at their risk and resilience and develop investment portfolios.
So, how can a community partner like our cities or resilient cities help the cities look at their projects and using this portfolio approach?
I think what's really exciting for our network is that we're now 10 years old. So in most cases, we have the opportunity not to just talk about what could happen, but actually to work with city members to showcase how this work is happening, and then to help scale that and to replicate it in other cities where it's successful. I know we have a lot of folks that are called in from the city of Cape Town. And one of the best examples we've seen in portfolio management is from the city of Cape Town, where integrated in their capital planning process and their project management process, they have integrated resilience metrics to evaluate projects and then to show how those projects are going to deliver for communities. And so that's become a really important aspect of that planning. What we can do as a network is we can really lift up the hood, if you will, show what's under that project management process and help other cities to learn from that and then to really adapt it into a way that's appropriate. Similarly, I think Kelly, and a lot of the work that we're doing with the foundation, with Zurich Foundation, looking at how communities can be involved in co-creating solutions, right? So you have kind of a top-down approach with capital planning, but you also have a bottom-up approach where it's really important to look at specific issue areas where no matter how much you invest from a hard infrastructure perspective, you're never going to quite get to that ultimate resilience. It actually takes a lot of community management and solution development. And so we need to also invest in that bottom-up solutions in those communities that are particularly vulnerable, and so that they can co-create those solutions with you, have the awareness, and manage their own community resilience.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. Gregory, I'm going to switch over to you now. And I just want to ask you kind of a level setting question just for folks in the audience that might have this question in their head. Can you help the audience understand what is the difference between Zurich North America, my employer, Zurich Insurance Group, and the Z Zurich Foundation?
Yeah, sure, Kelly, and hello, everybody. And the Z Zurich Foundation, Zurich North America is a branch of Zurich Insurance Group. This is a commercial arm of Zurich Insurance in North America. And the Z Zurich Foundation is the corporate foundation of Zurich Insurance Group. So we are a legally independent organization to Zurich, but we are primarily funded by members of the Zurich Group globally. So the Zurich Foundation, in short, is the primary vehicle that Zurich is using to implement its community investment strategy worldwide.
Excellent. So with that understanding, Gregory, what does Zurich and the Z Zurich Foundation see as its role both in helping communities build resilience, and how does that role differ between Zurich as a commercial business entity and the Z Zurich Foundation?
Yeah, so I think our role, I think it's very simple, both from a Zurich and Zurich Foundation perspective. Our role is to create brighter futures. And of course, at the foundation, we take the lens of creating brighter futures for vulnerable people and those who cannot access to very important services, such as, for example, insurance in some cases, right? So we want to create brighter futures for people with the resources and specific expertise of the insurance and risk management business. And with a strong belief at the foundation, and that's probably a bias for being linked to an insurance company, the strong belief that actually prevention is the best form of protection. So in the climate resilient space, we have a lot to bring to those who need the most in order for those communities to strengthen their resilience to climate change. It's also important for us at the foundation to focus on where vulnerability is the greatest. And needless to say, as most of you on the call know, but actually climate vulnerability piles up to many other vulnerabilities. Those communities, in particular in urban area, that are already vulnerable to social economic factors, that have the least access to infrastructure, services, and resources, will be the most affected communities by the impact of climate change. So at the foundation, we really see our role as one bringing more equity in the system, as we fundamentally believe that there can be no climate resilience without social equity, Kelly.
That's great. And so how has Zurich's approach to this um, issue kind of changed or evolved over time?
Well, Zurich has always been affected and involved in the climate space, whether this is on the mitigation agenda and supporting the transition requirements, but also in the adaptation agenda. First and foremost, initially with the work of the Z Zurich Foundation worldwide, but also Zurich has commercial capabilities on the risk engineering side to provide solutions to customers on how to approach climate resilience for them in their operations. So I think the how do we have changed over time our role? If I look at the foundation which I represent today, I don't think our role has fundamentally changed over time. But I would say our focus had evolved significantly compared to 11 years ago when we started a climate alliance focusing on flood resilience in rural areas, predominantly in the global south. As the climate change materialization was becoming truly global, multi-hazard based, we've completely evolved our setup from global south to also global north, in particular in urban areas, from rural areas to also cover urban areas, as I said, and the third one from a single hazard lens, which was flood, to a multi-hazard lens, because now we also look at floods, heat wave, wildfires, and severe storms. So we really try to evolve our approach and our focus as the materialization of climate change, unfortunately, evolves in many different ways. Perhaps one aspect of our role that has changed along this journey is probably seeing us primarily doing community programming, direct community interventions at a community level, to one that we still do that a lot as a mean to build the proof points and to inspire and influence market participants from both the public sector and the private sector to help us to scale impact of our climate resilience approach. So we continue to do a lot of community interventions with the community, not for the community, but with the aim, of course, to provide direct support, but with the second aim, very intentional, to use this to build proof points that actually climate resilience can work. Prevention is the best form of protection, and invite market participants to plug and play in order for us to scale quickly and effectively. You're on mute, Kelly.
How did that happen? I don't know how that happened. I apologize. So are there advantages for Zurich in focusing on geographies where we have a business presence?
So as far as the foundation is concerned, our primary driver is to, as I said, focus on where vulnerability is the greatest. That's really a fundamental funding principles we have as a foundation. So I think climate change materializes everywhere. So we don't have necessarily a policy that says we only have to fund programs where Zurich has a commercial presence. Actually, on the climate change portfolio, we initially started in the global south, where insurance is not available for many of those communities. So actually, we took initially the opposite route. Now, as we evolve our setup, and as climate change materialized globally more and more, of course, we had a lot of Zurich markets really asking us whether we could also bring this expertise, knowledge, and ecosystems also to where Zurich has a commercial presence. For us, we saw that as a big opportunity, of course, because it was a means to extend our geographic footprint and extend our ability to impact more people than we were doing. But also when we have the commercial side of Zurich present, of course, we leverage on many things. We can leverage on the skills and expertise of all the employees that can be super instrumental in tackling climate resilience issues. I'm thinking about risk management expertise. I'm thinking about risk engineering expertise. I'm thinking about claims handling, the rebuilding, reconstructions expertise as well. So this is really fundamentally helpful for the programs and for the communities that need that service and expertise. I think the way when Zurich has a commercial presence is, it's usually very well connected with many of the stakeholders that Lorraine talked about in terms of city officials, civil society. I mean, the strategic stakeholders are established connection with Zurich, and this is helping to accelerate the setting up of those programs eventually. And then last but certainly not least, it's really how can we as a foundation, together with partners like RCN and others, how do we leverage from the existing relationship that Zurich has locally with their customers from the B2B space, with their intermediaries, with their distribution and other business partners? So how can we leverage those connections and as a mean to really try to bring those partners to join us and scale impact of our efforts? There are lots of things and solutions that we develop through our programs. And of course, our funding is limited. So at some point, there is this notion that when something works, how do you scale and how do you do it also with increased resources? And this is where Zurich can play a big part to support organizations like RCN to get this additional finance that are required to scale impact further of the solutions that are effective.
Great, thank you, Gregory. Thank you for that, and thank you for bringing up the skills-based volunteering. I'll just throw in my 2 cents that I come to this project, or this partnership, I should say, from the business side of Zurich, and has become profoundly apparent to me in the last year is that we do have a lot of information and valuable skills and competencies that we can add to this discussion, not just the discussion of the financing, but just kind of the boots on the ground, talking through some of the ideas around how to help these communities build resilience, to understand what their risks are in particular, as you said in the beginning. So I think that that's something that there's a lot of opportunity for Zurich to be able to bring to that table. So thank you for highlighting that on behalf of the business side. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go to some questions for the both of you. So Lauren, you first. What are some of the key areas for resilience investment and why?
Thanks, Kelly. I think when we are talking about resilience investment, we have to talk about both the hard and the soft areas for investment. And you and Gregory just wound up a short conversation around skills-based volunteering, but we would absolutely focus first on skills investment when it comes to resilience and resilience planning. The capacity building that I spoke about earlier in terms of being able to take the right information about infrastructure needs and use that in collaboration with risk-based data around climate and other shocks and stresses. Maybe those are earthquake risks, other types of perils that our cities are facing. That information that needs to be integrated into planning. And also, as mentioned, capacity building around how to leverage that finance, how to find the right risk capital, how to find the right long-term, short-term investments. I saw there was a question in the chat about what kinds of returns investors are looking for when it comes to resilience projects. Now, that depends a lot on the type of resilience project, but if we are talking about investment in terms of infrastructure, you talk to most of the large pension funds, they are looking for about an 8% return on their infrastructure projects. Right? That can seem like a very tall order for cities, especially with some of these resilience projects that are mitigating risk. So you have to figure out where there is that upside potential and where there isn't, and where to put in the different types of finance. That's probably a webinar in and of itself, but suffice it to say, to your question, Kelly, we need to build more skills in that way. We need to invest in those skills. Now, if we're talking about hard infrastructure, I'll be really quick about that. I think most cities know the traditional areas for infrastructure investment to build resilience, but some of the emerging areas I want to focus on where we don't have enough investment because, again, these are newer or more emerging and more urgent threats around flood and coastal risk management. That's an area that needs more investment, both inland and coastal flooding. In terms of cyber resilience, we're seeing a lot of additional investment that is needed in order to keep cities' systems safe and keep cities online and keep services coming to citizens in difficult times. And then finally, and this will, I think, come as no surprise to any of our participants today, is housing. Right? We need continual investment in safe and resilient housing. And that encompasses so many challenges, but also the opportunity to solve for a lot of issues that are happening at the same time.
Thank you, Lauren. Your reference to cyber resilience was particularly interesting to me. I mean, that's something that's of a key concern from a Zurich business perspective, but it might not necessarily come immediately to mind when you think about city resilience. And I would imagine the same issues that Zurich is constantly protecting itself against, our cities have the same exposure. So I think it's good to keep maybe some of those additional issues might not be, like I said, at the forefront of everyone's mind at the start of the conversation, but it's definitely a concern for our cities as well. Gregory, I want to ask you the same question.
Yes, of course.
from the foundation's perspective.
I think Lauren, sorry.
Yep. Sorry. No, sorry.
So I think in addition to what Lauren mentioned, on our side, first we are involved, as Lauren mentioned earlier, in what people can refer to as the last mile of the resilience chain. We prefer to say the first mile, right? Because we want to generate impact, and we know at community level, and we know that to do so effectively requires solutions that are unique for each community for the most part. You can find some similarities, but communities are no two communities are the exact same. So it calls for bespoke solutions. It calls for a need to really first investing significantly, and this is what we've done, to develop the necessary toolkits and resources to work with communities on understanding their specific situations before we start intervening, before we start thinking about what are the solutions. The tool we use is climate resilience measurement for communities. And we build that, and we invest significant resources to build that. And actually, it's good you talk about cyber, because yes, these are climate resilience measurement for communities, but actually what this framework looks at is 50 different sources of resilience, right? That includes infrastructure, that includes many other dimensions. And then we overlay, what if flood comes in? What if heat waves come in, etc.? And then we start to see and identify to what extent the community is resilient, and where are the weak areas that we then work with the communities to define and implement with them effective solutions eventually. So there's a big investment that is done to make sure that we are absolutely contextualized. Then the other thing, of course, in order to do that, we need to build an ecosystem that does not exist, because it requires so many different expertise, so many different stakeholders. You need to build the infrastructure and the ecosystem which will allow you to understand the areas of resilience to strengthen, and also to develop that with the community and empower the community to carry on going forward. The third piece of element is we are involved in 24 countries worldwide in supporting over 500 communities. So you may imagine the amount of knowledge, good practice that we can share among programs to see who can eventually benefit from that. So there's a lot of investment is around that knowledge management, best practices sharing across our network to make sure that at least what can be reused elsewhere is done effectively as well. And finally, as I said, it takes a village to do that. And as generous as Zurich Insurance is with its donation to the Z Zurich Foundation, it's nowhere near what's needed to fix the global climate problem, right? So I think we need to make the right trade-off. And I think we also need to find partners to scale what we do. We do a lot of groundwork, it's ecosystem development, the admin side. So there's the foundations of our project is where we kick in, we generate the proof points. But then, how do we then attract partners to plug and play in a very effective way for them? So this notion of how do we invest in advocacy to scale impact through the development of partnerships, and also to the development of or generating or influencing changes at system level, so that we can look at it from a sustainable and long-term way. You're on mute.
You're muted.
I don't know why my computer keeps muting me. I apologize. Maybe I'm getting some feedback. But Gregory, you said that or you mentioned the CRMC as a tool that the foundation uses to help communities understand what their risks and needs are. And I'm curious, how do we look at reconciling their business priorities with what the community needs in order to make sure that their voices are central to the solutions that are being financed?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kelly. And I think I would offer a twist in my answer, because actually, as far as we are concerned, we see these intertwined, right? So it's not the point about reconciling. They are both intertwined, right? So that's a better way on our side. We tend to look at these things. So our priority, as I said earlier, is to create brighter future together for vulnerable people. And to do so, we work with the communities, as I said, not for the communities. So their engagement, their implication, their participation is from the get-go, in terms of working with them to understand their situation, share with them the results, co-design and co-shape bespoke solutions that they can also implement themselves with our support. So we are a facilitator. So we want to empower them all the time. And that's our business priority that is 100% aligned with the needs of the community locally. Yeah? And at the end of the day, they need to feel and be empowered. As it's not good if we create dependency. We're here to enable them to kickstart. There are many people that want to adapt to climate change, but they may not have the direct resources or the knowledge to do that, right? So that's what we bring. But the intention for us, we would fail if we are needed forever in the ecosystem. We win when we come in, and that we go out after a certain period of time and the communities carry on.
Great, thank you for that. Lauren, I wanted to get from your perspective, looking at it from the Our Cities side, how do you recommend reconciling business priorities when you're partnering with the private sector? How do you reconcile their business priorities with the community needs to ensure the voices are central to the solutions being financed?
I think the most important thing is to have a strong set of priorities coming from the communities and the cities. Our role is to help to articulate those, to make sure that they're clear, because where you have a clear shared set of priorities and everyone knows what are the rules of the game and where are the goalposts, then we can actually score, we can win together, right? So that's really the role that we play, is working with the communities in our member cities to make sure that those holistic resilience strategies that, in most cases have taken months and hundreds and sometimes thousands of people have been consulted in the preparation of those strategies and the setting of those priorities, keeping that front and center as we do project development. That's really essential. And then within those parameters, then it becomes easier and easier to collaborate and to align those goals. Private sector partners, most of the businesses that exist in any of our cities, most of those businesses were created because they are solving a societal problem, right? Insurance is no different, right? You're solving a societal problem. We have a protection gap. We have to bridge it, right? Your restaurant is solving your problem that people are really hungry. So whatever your business purpose is, right, you can point that towards a resilience agenda if the priorities are clear. So I think that's our job as a partner, is to make sure that those resilience priorities are well articulated, and also to make sure that we are breaking down the boundaries so that we don't miss opportunities to figure out those resilient solutions where multiple partners or multiple private sector actors can work together. And I think what we've been doing lately, and Kelly, you were kind enough to attend a meeting on our Resilience Finance Task Force in New York during New York Climate Week, is to have more of our private sector partners in the room across an ecosystem. So looking at our partners who are in design and engineering, right, and urban planning, looking at our partners who are in finance, more traditional banking sector, pension funds, and insurance, in the room with cities, talking about their portfolios and figuring out their roles in addressing those priorities. So the other big role I think we have is in convening multi stakeholder, although I don't love the word stakeholder because I think it's too generic, but multi-party conversations and multi-party solution forums where we can work together on solving these complex problems.
Great, thank you. Okay, I want to turn this back over to the audience. So we are going to put you to work now. We have a polling question for you. Nicole, if I can ask you to put the polling question on the screen. This you don't have to leave the system for, but we would like to get your thoughts on the following question. Where can the financial support driven by cross-sector partnerships best be leveraged? There may be more than one answer that you think is correct, but I would just encourage you to pick one that immediately comes to mind. Is it resident education campaigns, local, state, and federal lobbying efforts, skills-based activities such as climate risk assessments, flood mapping, etc., volunteering, or direct funding to grassroots organizations? So if you'll just take a quick minute for us and give us your answer choice. All right, Nicole, can you put up the answers for us? All right, fairly evenly split, at least among lobbying, skills-based activities, and direct funding. So now, Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to kind of react to our polling question. What do you think of the results? What did you think the answer was going to be? Were there any surprises? What are your thoughts?
Sure. I think that this is a pretty good result, and I think it's quite representative because there are opportunities for all of those activities to have impact. But I think that what resonates with me are those areas that are really prioritized the most, which is around the skills-based volunteering, then that collaborative lobbying, and then direct investment. And I would put them in that order because I do think that it's sequential, right? If we really know what our issues are, and we're all rowing in that same direction, we can advocate for that, right, to national and others who have the ability to then direct funds towards our cities and communities. And then those funds, right, can be really beneficial on the ground, right? Enabling local organizations who already have a footprint, who already know the communities, to be the ones to actually take charge and be implementers, right? To be those problem solvers.
Great, thank you. And Gregory, excuse me, we
I
talked.
think,
Yep.
I think you guys were tough in asking one single answer, right? So that's tough for the audience, but here you go, right? Look, I believe that all of them are needed, right? None of them in isolation can make it work. You need to have all of them, and you need to have them deployed in a way that is very specific to to the context and very specific to the geographies, to the city, capacity, to the ecosystem in place, and so forth and so forth. So I think you need all of them in a sequence way, as Lauren rightly said. And I think the degree to which you use and what's needed the most is probably what needs to be contextualized at a program by program level, at a city level, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question from the audience, and please, if you have any questions for either or both Gregory and Lauren, please put them in either the Q&A or in the chat. But we have a question from Abdul for Lauren. We often talk about urban resilience, but in countries like Pakistan, where cities are the main cause of environmental degradation of entire regions, for instance, air pollution of Lahore city spills over to large swaths of rural areas, can we think about inclusive resilience or regional resilience?
Absolutely. I think thanks for the question, Abdul. It's a very important one. Resilience efforts don't stop at cities' formal boundaries. I think when we talk about resilience And actually, when we work on resilience, we do work very often with cities and with their regions. In fact, the last 2 new members who joined Resilient Cities Network, Penang in Malaysia, and then Broward County in Florida, both joined with much more than a specific city in mind. And so we do work in that integrated way. I think when we look at how to create resilient strategies, you can use similar frameworks and apply them to a region, and it's really important to do so. So air pollution is one of those issues that can be both, urban to rural, and I'm sure in the case of Pakistan, much of the emissions may be caused by transport, some may be by buildings, and maybe some by industry. We also have in other, member cities, rural to urban air pollution, right? Coming from the burning of crops and other things. So it's really important to take that view that does encompass those peri-urban areas and make sure that folks are part of the conversation, because, as you rightly point out, you can't solve those problems for the rural areas without involving urban and vice versa.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Stephen asks an interesting question. He says, workers and workplaces are on the front line of climate change. Is there any funding support for trade unions to support workers and communities at the local level? I'll throw that one out to both of you.
Laurie, you want to start?
Sure.
Okay, sorry, did you say Kelly or Lauren? Because I would have to say this is one of those areas where I don't know specific trade union supports that are available, but I think that there are a lot of folks who are looking at labor issues and how businesses, small and medium enterprises, can incorporate resilience measures and preparedness into their workplace guidance. But in terms of specific programs for trade unions, I would defer to other colleagues who might have more specific information about that.
Yeah, Lauren, on my side, I would also answer that as far as company resilience to climate change, etc. I mean, there's a lot of supports that businesses are providing, but that goes outside of the philanthropic space, I would say. If I look at what the Z Zurich Foundation does, is really to select communities not based on worker population, etc. This is a group of communities, slums, and other areas in urban centers where, as I said earlier, vulnerability is great, and where we can have the biggest impact, hopefully. So we select that community based on the geographic location, based on social economic factors, not necessarily workers versus not workers, etc. It's more of a mixed bag from that perspective.
Gregory, while I have you here, I'm sure that there are some folks on the phone that are at various stages of their community resilience journey. What advice would you give to a city that was, or I should say, what are one or two things that cities that are just starting out on their resilience journey, what would you tell them that they need to know if they're just starting on this path?
Yeah, good. I want to stay humble, so I'm always nervous with advice, right? But in sharing some of our learnings and experiences, I would think that first, we see that no one can solve it alone, right? So it really, I think it calls for humility, it calls for determination, it calls at the city level, I think, to be extremely transversal, as Lauren was saying, right? This is not the job of one area in the city, it is a transversal topic, right? It also calls for being integrated. So it's not just the public sector, it's the public sector, the private sector, civil society, communities, and people, right? It's all together that it takes a village, right? And the other bit I would say is the one-size-fits-all model is not going to work. So take time to be bespoke, to be customized to your needs, the needs of your communities, involve them, and start with the most vulnerable in mind. The reason why I also say that is Actually, building resilience, when you look at it from a risk management perspective, building resilience is you can see that as a big chain, right? And remember that a chain is as strong as its weakest link, right? So if you identify what those weak links are, then focus on improving them as a matter of priority. So by strengthening them, you will strengthen the whole chain. That's what we see on the ground, and these are the observations I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Gregory. Thank you. Lauren, Hamid asks, how can Resilient Cities Network collaborate with partner cities for conducting research and implementation of local solutions regarding urban climate adaptation and resilience?
Thanks, Hamid, for the question. When Resilient Cities Network has interest from new member cities or new cities around the world, we work through our city resilience planning framework to create a holistic resilience plan. So there is actually a brand new city resilience framework. As I mentioned before, we're a decade old as a network. And so we have just refreshed that methodology, and that was actually launched last week at the World Urban Forum with partners of ours from Arup. And so if there is interest from your city or from any of the cities on the call to really apply that framework and to do a holistic resilience plan, that's something that we can support.
Thank you, Lauren. And I want to end on kind of a future-looking question for you. What does successful community resilience look like for you?
When we talk about successful community resilience efforts, when we talk about the mission of resilient cities that we work arm in arm with our members to deliver, it's to really empower cities and their residents to be resilient in the face of whatever shock or stress they face. So that means that those communities understand their risk, they're aware of it. The risk isn't going away. In fact, the risk may, in some cases, in many of our cases, be increasing, but that we understand that risk and that we have the capacity to respond to that risk and to, as we talked about during so much of this webinar, co-create those solutions and then find those right partners who are going to help us to implement those solutions and to finance those solutions, because we know that our communities have so many of those tools and a lot of that knowledge, but may need additional support to make those solutions a reality. So that's what it looks like to me, Kelly. It's that empowerment of communities and their ability to gather the resources they need from the community, from the businesses, from their allies around them.
Thank you. And Gregory, any last comments from you on what successful community resilience looks like?
Yeah, hard to say, but in two sentences, Manuel is someone we support in Nicaragua in one of our programs. And he told us last year, my dream is that no one lives with the fear of flood. And I think success for me looks like that we can make Manuel's dream a reality, and not only for floods, but also for heat waves, wildfires, and extreme storms all over the world. As simple as that.
Excellent. Thank you, Gregory. Well, thank you to both of you, Gregory and to Lauren, for sharing your time and your expertise. This has been a really, I think, enlightening session for us. I share the appreciation, I think, of everybody on the phone for sharing your time with us. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We hope that you found this session enlightening and engaging. And I am going to turn it back to Valerius for some few final comments.
Thank you, Kelly. I join you in thank you, everyone, our panelists and our audience for joining us today. I think this was a wonderful session to mark the end of the Urban Resilience series, a collaboration with Zurich North America. As Kelly mentioned at the beginning, we first started to dive into the topic of risk, understanding what it is, and how cities can start to address it. And then we went into the topic of community resilience and the importance of centering resilient solutions in the experiences of people and those who are closest to climate risk. It was great now to close with this great intervention about how to mobilize the funding to get things done. So we're very proud to close the session today. Please watch our website for the session's recording and summary. Stay tuned for the next one on December 5th of the Cities on the Frontline speaker series. More information will be shared through our social media channels. And thank you, everybody, from wherever you're connecting from, and have a wonderful day or evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.